Well, rock and roll. This is one of the best set of opening slides I've seen at the Institute. Thank you very much to the team for putting this together. Um, I am really thrilled and honored to have this conversation with such a distinguished panel today. I'll introduce the panel in a minute. I'll say a few words about who we are. My name is Carlo Totoro Breda. I'm the executive chairman of the Totoro Breda Institute and the National AI and Cybersecurity Information Sharing and Analysis Organization. The organization essentially is a think tank, and we work closely and in alignment, let's say, with governments, the private sector, academia, and we like to work on things that are meaningful, and we like to sort of raise up awareness around issues that are threats, emerging threats, national security threats. So the way that we work within the organization, we have we're a 501c3, California 501c3. Within the Institute, we have the ISAO. Within the ISAO, we have a number of task forces, one of which is really focused on resolving the vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure in the United States and in NATO. We have another one around AI and sustainability, and a brand new task force called the Post-Quantum Cryptography and Quantum Computing Task Force, of which Jason McNutt is the chair. So that's just a little bit about the background of the Institute, and of course, I'd welcome all viewers to take a look look us up on the internet, and join if applicable. Insofar as the conversation today, this is a 90-minute panel discussion. It's what we call a hot topic discussion, and we'll be talking about post-quantum encryption, the quantum threat, quantum computing. What is it all about? How dangerous is it really? Should we be sleeping at night, or should we, sleep with one eye open? Which is kind of what I do, frankly. And I don't know how healthy that is, but we'll talk about the genuine level of alertness that we should be considering. So the panel is, I think, one of the smartest group of professionals in the field that we've ever been able to assemble. And so I'll do a quick intro, and I'd like to first of all thank everybody in the panel for making the effort to join us today. It is really a deep honor for me to be here and host this. I'm not very qualified to host this panel. I think my qualification is that I used to enjoy Star Trek as a kid. It's pretty much as far as it goes. But no, I have a genuine passion and interest for cybersecurity and quantum computing. So I hope that I'll be able to facilitate this conversation. I would also like to thank the audience for tuning in, both the audience that we have on YouTube and the audience that we have on LinkedIn, and of course everybody that will be viewing this later on as the video gets viral traction on YouTube. So today we have with us Bill Genovese from Kyndryl. Many of you will know that Kyndryl is a spin-off, if I'm not mistaken, from IBM, the original IBM Global Services. We have Steve Oren, the Chief Technology Officer of Intel Federal. We have Jason McNutt, the CEO of Cerulean Systems and Chair of the Post-Quantum Encryption Task Force. We have Skip Sanzeri from Q-Secure, and we have Adrian Neal from Capgemini. So what I will do is I will ask you, gentlemen, if you're okay to do a little 2-3 minute introduction about yourselves, and then we'll kick off the panel. So Bill, would you like to go first?
Thank you very much, Carlo, and pleased and honored to be here with my fellow panelists. Bill Genovese. I am a partner in Kyndryl Consulting. As Carlos said, Kyndryl is a carve-out spinoff. Used to be Global Technology Services in IBM, which was the big managed services outsourcing division. I've worked at the intersection of IT and financial services for the better part of almost 30 years globally in 6 countries outside the United States, 4 states. Various roles. My sub-practice team is made up of industry CIOs, CISOs, and CTOs. So I've been in the C-suite 3 or 4 times outside Kyndryl. I'm ex-IBM, ex-KPMG. I led Huawei's corporate strategy in China, Huawei Telecom, vice president corporate strategy over global banking and financial markets. And they had a quantum simulator on their cloud. So I am leading outside my day job in consulting and advising CIOs in the financial services sector. We are launching a quantum services offering ourselves, Kyndryl. The benefit of working with us is we're 100% partner agnostic. So we can work with Q-Secure, many of the Intel's our partner and customer, as an example. So, we're rapidly ramping up this services offering and working with partners. So,
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bill. Steve, would you like to go next, please?
Sure. Thank you, Carlo. And again, it's a pleasure to be here with this esteemed panel talking about a really interesting topic. As you mentioned, I'm Steve Warren. I'm the federal CTO for Intel Corporation. And in that role, I help the US government and the public sector at large and its ecosystem adopt the technologies, architect for the future, solve mission and enterprise problems that are across all technology domains, AI, high performance computing, edge, and cybersecurity. My background is in cybersecurity. I've been doing security for almost 30 years, both in the early days in startups, in cryptography, and enterprise security, as well as running security pathfinding for Intel for about 10 years prior to joining the federal team. I'm really looking forward to the conversation because, as Bill mentioned, Intel and many others are very interested in the quantum world, both the post-quantum cryptography as well as quantum computing. I would say that Intel's view on the world and on the market is whatever technologies are necessary to make that happen. The real question is, how do you scale? And I think that's where Intel is doing a lot of its focus, isn't to build the most exquisite, massive quantum chip, but how do you build 1 million of the right chips to drive that quantum future? And then looking at, from a technology readiness today, how do we make sure that the industry and the ecosystem are ready for the post-quantum computing requirements from an encryption perspective? And how do we get those technologies built in to the software, the architectures, the protocols today to be ready whenever that moment happens to hit?
Thank you very much, Steve. Jason, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thank you, Carlo. Yeah, it's an extraordinary honor, privilege to me, honest, to be here with the rest of the panelists in the group. I took an early interest in security and cryptography, although in a small fashion back in the U.S. military, and then moved into the security space where I spent a great deal of time in the physical security around access control and video services. But when I decided to move back into looking at interconnectivity, encryption, I really took an interest in flexibility, scalability, and just the standardization of things. So most of my career in the physical security space wasn't just spent pushing or managing distribution. I did a lot of work on trying to look at how do we justify the decisions that we made. And a lot of that came down to the insurance space, liability protection, examination of how do our systems, how do they hold up once, failure events happen, and then, making sure that that's still in retrospect, the decision that we would have made, from that, preemptive post-mortem examination of our infrastructure that we choose to invest in. And so, today now I operate as the founder and CEO of Cerulean Systems. We are, we're in the symmetric cryptography space, but while we design, we think computationally secure algorithms, we leverage towards energy efficiency and trying to reduce the amount of infrastructure, and it both in the server side and SaaS space, but also to have that added benefit of being able to potentially increase mobile device and battery usage. So it's an evolving conversation. We're excited to be a part of it, and thankful to be here.
Thank you, Jason. And Skip is next on my pattern there. Skip Sanzeri. Would you like to introduce?
Yeah, thank you, Carlo, and thanks for the invitation to be on this panel. And it's great to be here with these panelists, super bright folks. And I'm so excited that we're doing this because, as we know, most of us tuning in and certainly on this panel know that there's a threat out there, timing, etc. We have to think about that, but we don't think there's any way that you could be prepared too early for this threat. Due to the upgrade times and just creating a safer world, right? So at QSecure, we started in 2019 working on a way to build software to deploy algorithms, the new cryptography out to the enterprise. And we see that NIST has done a lot of work, and the whole idea here is, how can we secure data that's exfiltrated? Our focus is on data in motion, so data that's being communicated. How can we secure that so that as we see these breaches that are happening every day, I mean, you can't go one day without seeing another, 7 million records just got exfiltrated from somewhere. And every day I think to myself, what if those were quantum protected? Because they show up on the dark web, and that's many reasons why people know, well, they got decrypted somehow. But if they had post-quantum protection or quantum resilient protection on them, they may not have gotten decrypted. I don't know. We don't know for sure, but the effort has to go in now. So at QSecure, we're doing our part, and I know it's just one hole to plug in the world out there, but we're trying to do that part. And my background prior to QSecure was in early stage finance and some venture capital, had a number of exits, and just decided that this would be the biggest upgrade cycle in history that we're working on now. This will be way bigger than Y2K. It's the entire world's communications. So any of you, this exact webinar right now that we're on is an example that's protected by encryption that will go down with a powerful quantum computer. So, idea is that we need to work on this ASAP, and this upgrade cycle will take all of us. It's going to take every one of us here across the world to start fixing this problem, because it's also 20 billion connected devices. So it starts at the chip level. Steve's doing. Certainly all the managed services, Bill's doing, Symmetric, Jason's doing, Capgemini, great global firm. They got to get involved. We all got to do this. So it's on all of us. But I want to thank everybody for being here, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Skip. Adrian, you're certainly last and certainly not least. Please do go ahead.
Thank you, Carlo. Thanks for inviting me. I'm definitely feeling imposter syndrome with all these gentlemen here. Struggling with that a little bit, but yeah, thank you anyway. My background is about 40 years in the industry. I started with IBM back in the 80s as a programmer, and a good 25 of those years have been in PKI and security generally. 3 continents, 8 countries, all over the world. Currently in Switzerland, and really Switzerland is where I started in the crypto business, if you like. I joined a Swiss bank in the late 90s when crypto was unheard of, and became their first crypto guy, if you like. So yes, crypto has been my life for I don't know how long now. It still is. So I'm the global lead for post-quantum crypto at Capgemini. And trying to make sense of it for clients. There's just so much conflicting information, and even when it's not conflicting, it's changing rapidly. What's good yesterday is not going to be good tomorrow. clients are scratching their heads, thinking, should I do something now? Should I wait? And actually, to be honest, that's a hard, that's a difficult question to answer at the moment. So yeah, lots of discussion. I'm looking forward to it today.
Great. Let's kick it off. And I think you set the scene, Adrian, beautifully there. And actually, I have to thank Capgemini very much, because it is thanks to the conversations I had with Capgemini, Julian Van Velzen, initially, that we decided to put together this post-quantum cryptography task force. And we count on your ongoing collaboration there, because it's so interesting. The thing about what I learned about from Capgemini last year, it was a year and a half ago, was how real the threat is. Obviously you've been conducting ongoing research, and Julian, your colleague, gave us a talk at the Institute, and he called it the quantum apocalypse. Okay. So, and that term has been used, and I don't know. I mean, I think it's been used, sure, it's dramatic, but there's a real reality there. So I'd like to use this hour that we've got ahead of us to really try to, come to terms with, is this a real threat? How big of an issue is it? How soon is it going to happen? Who's going to be the perpetrators, right? What are your thoughts? Now, you've been in that role for a long time, Adrian. We've been speaking to Julian. What is your feeling about how scared we should be, and how fast society should move to adopt post-quantum cryptography right across our military installations, our banking and financial services, our medical and healthcare, and everything that really represents the running of a country and the critical infrastructure? I feel, working, adjacent to all of these sectors, that there's a level of apathy or lethargy or just misunderstanding. I think it's just ignorance to some extent. It's a new world, and not many people have had the opportunity to really dig into it. So how would you open this, Adrian? What would you say?
Oh, quite easily. So when I approached this just earlier this year, get my head around the whole quantum thing, what's going on, where are we really? I looked at a metric that IBM came up with back in 2019, so only 5 years ago. They decided that if you just measure qubits, it doesn't tell you anything. A machine with 1,000 qubits it is no better than the machine with 10 qubits if it's still got noise. It doesn't mean anything, essentially. So they came up with a metric called quantum volume. And this was quite interesting, because quantum volume basically says, well, we look at all these different things within the number of gates, the quantum depth, and so forth, as well as qubits, a level of noise, and so on and so on. And we take a measurement and we say, okay, this is your quantum volume. This is the quantum volume you've got to in your particular quantum computer. So I used that to start looking at what's out there in the industry. What have we built? What have we got? And started to chart this and plot this. And IBM said their prediction was that starting 2019, and they were saying, right, by the time you get to 2034, that's when you'll have sufficient quantum volume to have quantum advantage and the cryptographically relevant quantum computers, the CRQCs. I thought, okay, well, there's my baseline. Then I actually started looking at what's going on, and pretty much everyone was just slightly up or down along their line, along the graph. And then there was this one outlier, which was Quantinum. They're the Honeywell spin-off. And they'd made this bold claim around 2020. Oh, we're going to get to 2 to the 20, which is the quantum volume. They were saying we're going to get there in 5 years. I was thinking, well, sure you are. Whatever, hey, marketing. And I started to plot where they were going. And where you've got the graph going, this is the IBM. Even the IBM model is actually it's exponential. I'm just showing it as a log. Suddenly, Quantinuum is doing this. I'm thinking, hold on. Is that real? If they really are doing this, if this is real, then we're probably going to be in trouble very soon. So I decided to follow it, and bottom line is Quantinuum are double exponential or exponential upon exponential in terms of their speed of growth. Forget the number of qubits again. This is quantum volume. So it was no surprise when just a few months ago they said, oh, well, hey, we've actually created a logical qubit. I shouldn't say noise-free, noise-tolerant, a logical noise-tolerant qubit. And we didn't do it with 1,000 qubits, as has been predicted. We did it with 32. And like, what? 32 qubits instead of 1,000. So suddenly, clearly, they're not messing around. They're not talking rubbish. They really have done something. If you look at what I discovered just a few weeks ago, all of a sudden, 15 countries have applied export controls on any quantum computer with more than 34 qubits. I can't possibly imagine where they got that idea from. I wonder. And anything with a noise level of 10 to the minus 4, which would be pretty much Quantinuum's is 10 to the minus 5. But you get the point. Someone's realized that this is actually real. They really are making the advances they claimed they would make. We could be in trouble quite soon. Now, this message doesn't seem to be getting across to many people. You mentioned the word apathy. That's just the beginning. And the problem is, I'm confronted with a blog here, a blog there, with someone's opinion. I want to say I've no idea how knowledgeable they are, but actually once I read it, I then soon realize I do know how knowledgeable they are, and they aren't very knowledgeable. They don't know much, and they're saying, you've got nothing to worry about, guys. This problem isn't going to hit you until the late 2040s. Just sit back and relax. And you think, and senior executives of banks are reading this. I know, because they sent one to me saying, what do I think? I'm thinking, please, we are going to be in quite some serious trouble if this is the message that gets out, and we do not get out a message that challenges that based on facts rather than sentiment or apathy or some guy just told me it's not till 2040. So yes, I feel quite passionate about it, Carlo, but I think it's really rather serious.
Well, it worries me, and I'm so glad that you're saying what you're saying and that you're explaining the logic and the rationale behind your statement, which is really genuinely alarming. Now, an hour ago, in preparation for this panel, I thought, let me just see what videos I find on YouTube from NIST, right? And I saw a video with a NIST gentleman that was saying, well, don't worry, guys. This was like a 5-minute video. Don't worry, we've got it. You can just carry on encrypting as usual, and don't worry about the future. We're in control. And I didn't feel very comfortable or confident with that message, right? I have all the respect for NIST. It's an incredible organization. And we'll talk about standards later. But here we are with a contrast where some folks from the high end of industry, like yourself, Adrian, are saying, well, we should be really, really scared. If the references that you have are what's happening is happening. What do we know about what's actually happening in China? And, how long would it take for an adversarial nation to take us down? Because right now, with the sort of geopolitical volatility that we have, I think that, to a large extent, cyber warfare isn't really going to the next level. I mean, it's pretty bad already, but it could go to the next level once, the political guards drop, right? So, yeah, I'm incredibly worried about that, and I'm incredibly worried about how an organization like this is responding. Would anybody like to chime in? Steve, Jason, Skip, Bill?
So one thing I'll add to Adrian, and I want to sort of break it into two parts. So one is the problem we have today with, like you said, apathy. It's very hard. We as a humanity suck at doing risk assessment. We're just bad at it. We are very good at when I can see the risk, I can identify it and say, it's there. If I walk down this path and I can see the bear tracks, I know that's a risky thing. I'll go the other direction. We're really, really bad at evaluating risk where I don't have a definite date or target. And that's the problem with a lot of the current conversation around quantum computing. We're talking about it in the wrong way. We're saying, well, sometime in the future, 2025 to 2034 or beyond, there will be a quantum event. And that's the risk. And actually, that's the catalyst. That's not the actual risk. The risk is data is going to be decrypted. And so the real risk isn't that at that moment in time, everything becomes insecure. Yes, that is one of the outcomes. But the thing that really it helps, and I find that CIOs and CISOs, as well as industry leaders that understand what I'm about to say, are able to better evaluate the risk. It's at that moment in time, data that was encrypted up until that point will be decryptable. What that means, it's not just on that day suddenly my authentication breaks, yes, but everything that's been recorded or hacked that was encrypted from 10 years ago forward also becomes available. And so when you look at what is the risk I can measure, what is the thing I can go do, how can I help organizations make a determination of where to apply my what do I do with this risk? It's looking at what are the data that you want to be secure after that event. And look at that data and those transactions and how do you protect them in a post-quantum way? Because that data that you're literally typing on your computer today, let's say it's sensitive and you want it to be secure forever or for 20 years or whatever the data security rights requirements are for that piece of data, that decision has to happen now. Because whether it's in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, if that requirement is that data needs to be protected for national security, for regulatory, for privacy, longer than that 15 years, longer than 20 years, you're already under the gun. And it doesn't matter if it's 2040. We're already into 2024, so 4 years are gone, and that data is going to be insecure at that moment. And so it's really about evaluating the risk of my data today that I want to keep protected at that future date. I don't have to know the future date. And there's really good evidence that we're seeing that, it's not as well publicized of what's going on at the nation state and criminal adversary side of the camp. There are a lot of data breaches. There was one a few weeks ago where 7 billion passwords were collected over the last 5 years. Great, that's all encrypted, decrypted. Everyone can see that information. It's terrible. But the ones that don't get the same fanfare is when a large data breach happens and the company says, "Oh no, you're good. The data was encrypted, so don't be worried. We've got you protected. You didn't have an exposure." Well, trust me, the people who did that data exfiltration didn't exfil that data knowing that it was encrypted and, oh my gosh, we got encrypted data, we can't do anything with it. They were doing that for a reason. That data is being stored. It's going into a data farm, into a storage facility for the day when they can decrypt it. And so they're creating the future value by exfiltrating important data from governments, financial services, healthcare, across these industries. And it's not like, they're taking data and trying to brute force it with massive computing today. Some may be. But the real goal is to have the large data sets available for when that quantum event happens. And that means the data that was compromised today is now future exposed. And so when you look about the risk problem, we can't be thinking about trying to identify a date, because as Andrea said, depending on who you believe at which blog, you're going to get 100 different dates. And I guarantee you that when the nation states have their date, no one's going to know about it. The public, from the Honeywell spinoff, that's going to be 5 years after a nation state, because they're going to hold that as a tight state secret.
Sure.
So the thing to remember is that date is going to be fast forward 5 years earlier than anyone in the open market is claiming they have a quantum capable system with the right quantum volumes. From our data security and our risk strategies, we need to start thinking about how do we protect our data today in all of its life cycle, at rest, in transit, and use for that future event. And I think that shift in focus is how organizations can actually take tactical measures and apply risk controls without knowing when that catastrophic event is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can add on to what Steve says. Steve, you're spot on. I mean, it couldn't be more accurate. The other thing that people don't realize is not all data out there is encrypted with the most advanced encryption. You think of RSA 2048, kind of the standard, right? A long key length to factor. But we were talking with the top 3 U.S. bank, and with their folks that are running really their quantum efforts, their cyber and crypto efforts, they've got 30% of their data still triple DES. That was broken back in the 90s. There's RSA 512 out there. There's RSA 1024 out there. Parts of the internet and parts of data being communicated have no encryption. So when people think of Q, this Q day, it's not going to be Q day. It's going to be a Q. It's going to be a Q period, time period, meaning that the data that Steve's talking about that's gotten exfiltrated, we call it store now, decrypt later, or steal now, decrypt later. The data that's exfiltrated, the weakest stuff is going to break first. So you think about this series of events that will happen, and we won't know. Steve's right. We will not know. It's just going to happen. And the only way we really do know is when we see things appearing on the dark web or whatever from hackers. But it's going to be a period of time. And it's in the need to move right now. I mean, the one thing that we haven't talked about yet, which we need to factor in, is AI. I mean, we're seeing now that we may have generative AI, which is AI that's smarter than all humans and now can actually begin to think a little bit for itself in 2027. How is that going to affect quantum development? We don't know, but I can tell you people investing a lot of time and effort in know that is going to speed things up. I mean, earlier Adrian was talking about this idea of exponential, double exponential. And by the way, Hartmut Nevin at Google, just for your notes, Adrian, you can look him up. He talked about that 3-4 years ago, the double exponential piece. Yep. Add generative AI in and now see where that goes. See how fast that's here. It's here now, folks. I mean, this is not going to be a 2034 anything. This is going to happen in a few years. I mean, if you talk to some of the folks, MITRE put out a report and said it's less than 3 years away. Now MITRE knows some stuff, right? They know some stuff, and all the warnings are there. So suggestion for enterprise and federal, any agencies, look into this right now. You don't have to buy a bunch of stuff. Just start looking into it. Get in front of this. Get in the know, so you'll know when you want to make the decision. You can make the decision.
Terrifying. Like Y2K, at least we knew when that was going to happen. It was going to be the 31st of December. And the fact here, the unknown quantity, makes it even more kind of disconcerting and unsettling. Bill, I know you were just about to jump in earlier. Do you want to jump in now?
Yeah, agree wholeheartedly with all of your points. I mean, I would, extend some of the thinking based on what Adrian said, Steve, and also Skip, in the sense from an attitude and readiness perspective, there's general apathy in terms of they don't know even enterprises on how to categorize criticality, integrity, and availability of cross-platform services for data at rest or in transit. I mean, you pick an example like internet banking, front ends on x86, web server farms, VMware, mid-tier on risk-based architectures, back end, which is the most frozen set of ice cubes on the mainframe. Okay, but you ask the CISO or the CIO for that bank, do you know what it costs you if you have a breach in terms of an hour of outage? No idea, because on a lot of their services, they haven't categorized them in terms of CIA, even in terms of what their vulnerability is. And tying what you all said together, the perspective is the impact of a series of quantum events is going to blow that up. Okay. I mean, if you look at where ransomware can kind of go and store now, decrypt later, okay, the hackers will get the knowledge of where's that critical data versus the other critical data. And they'll go after that first in terms of the decryption. But my point is, I didn't even talk about correlation of risk events, from an operational credit and market risk perspective. I mean, we can't handle 2 risk events correlated, let alone 3. Okay, so you get my point. I mean, the general hygiene and foundational securing of the house in terms of CIA and knowing what you're up against has largely not even been done yet. So that's frightening. And, and that's kind of the message we're starting to bring to clients, is because we've managed infrastructure. I mean, technology services and management, and you've got to know where your crown jewels are, not on the mainframe only, but across your estate. So,
Jason?
Yeah, I'm going to sound fairly similar right here, and I like I like to take most problems I find scale from individual to corporations, and oftentimes some of we because it's comfortable, right? We want to feel safe, and standardization and feeling like, okay, I conform to standards, allows me to feel safe, and I don't want to have to consider, especially because we don't want to say like, oh, do we need to be paranoid, right? Am I safe? But that first piece of accountability is whether we're in charge of standardization boards and we have advisory capacity in there, or right down to the individual, that we go home to be every single day, right? Is we are accountable. And it's not, the accountability piece begins at not trying to figure out who is accountable, but recognizing, when we talked about the store now, decrypt later, right? I am accountable for all my information that I continue to transmit, all the information I continue to save right now. And Skip pointed out, right, have I done, simply just because I conform to a standard that's still accepted today, it's not the best standard. And it's certainly this standard, from the, it was said the weak is going to fall first, right? What I'm doing is probably not in my own personal best interest, from a hindsight 5 years from now. And then that gets into that conversation of, if I'm an industrial commercial manufacturer, or if I'm, a nonprofit organization, who do we talk to? Who do we invite into the conversation? How do we know what to do? And with a million voices and a million options out there from service providers, we look at and we see a very, very narrow, and we have a narrow set of options that we're ultimately presented with, and so we have to start taking a look at, what does the ecosystem out there in terms of options from a cryptographic and security suite look like? Do we only consider, certainly we should, lean towards what is trusted, because there's better people out there, for the most part, making evaluations of these options. But from that life raft perspective, right, we need to have enough options, such as if this suite that we are using right now goes down, how quickly can we move? From that crypto agility perspective, how quickly can we move from one platform to the next? Do we know? And I'm basically like Skip's company right here. Do we even know how many platforms we support within our organization? How many of these run on critical infrastructure? But then, where do we step? When do we choose? And this is a more difficult conversation, but it's a conversation we need to be having, because there is so few spaces within the standardization options. We need to start looking at further software solutions to be able to have at the ready, and to start evaluating those as well. We need to push. I feel that there's a need to push standardization to continuously evaluate other options and to incorporate, more platforms into the conversation.
Jason, if I could add, you mentioned a term there I think is really critical, because a lot of focus is on the next wave of post-quantum safe algorithms, which is what NIST and others are looking at, and better key sizes and all of that. But that two word phrase you use is absolutely critical: crypto agility.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the ability to have a modularization of the cryptography package to support both multiple crypto systems today, but future proofing. And that's something that too few times in the various different times in the last 40 years where we've had to do cryptographic, whether the initial crypto insertion into our technology regimes, the move from DES, triple DES, and the variant of things to AES, the SHA-1, and all of the others behind the scenes. Oftentimes it's done, well, I'm going to go from algorithm A to algorithm B, and I'm good with algorithm B. Oh no, I got to go to algorithm C. And it's a whole new cycle. And I think we have an opportunity here because we're going to have to swap out, and we're going to have a hybrid time frame. We've already seen some apps already implement hybrid schemes to be able to support the current and the new, is being able to have that new implementation be agile, be able to swap in if one algorithm falls, I have another one ready to go, already integrated into my infrastructure, already populated out to the devices and services. And that crypto agility is going to be critical to future-proof our infrastructures from the hardware all the way up to the cloud. And that is one of the things that doesn't get talked about enough, but it's really something we've got to build in. And I think at the timing, because we're going to have a while in that, what Skip said, the quantum period, where we're going to be supporting both sides, the current cryptography, the post-quantum. You're not going to be able to flip a switch and just go from one to the next and magic. Everything is post-quantum. So as we build out that hybrid system, we can build in, because it's going to need to be, at least for two systems, agile. We can build it to be more agile for future-proofing as well.
Steve, let me jump on top of that as well, because I mean, this is the heart of where kind of our attitude at QSecure. So the one thing that both Jason and Steve talked about is crypto agility. Again, the ability to change out algorithms on the fly when necessary. The other thing you mentioned we call backwards compatibility, which is you're going to have to leave your stuff in place. None of us are going to call up a major enterprise, Global 500, and say, hi, how about tear out the stuff that works and put in the new risky stuff? Let's do that. No one's doing that, right? It's not going to happen. So we have to work in a hybrid environment where you're going to run existing encryption, and then you're going to use your post-quantum or your quantum resilient on top of that at the same time. Eventually, things may go all post-quantum, and that could happen. But for now, in order for people to use this, they're going to have to start looking at agility and looking at that compatibility. The other thing I would mention, well, two things. One is, so I've been to a number of countries, and a lot of countries are doing their own quantum safe cryptography or quantum resilient. Like in South Korea, it's KPQC. It's their own. They're not using NIST. Many countries are not going to use NIST. And that means that, again, there's a whole new set of agility there. The other thing I'll tell you is, and this is something we've seen now at enterprise, a lot of enterprises, as to what Steve was saying, they want to orchestrate their own cryptography. So cryptography now arrives in everything, in every system, in every process, in every piece of software, in every device. An enterprise, really, if they want to go and assess all that, it's going to take years and years and years. But what we're finding now, and we found this at Samsung, for instance, we were working with them, they said all their units will start orchestrating their own cryptography. What does that mean? That means that their cryptography is going to come in under their control, and they're going to distribute it. By orchestrating it, that allows you to have agility, it allows you to have backwards compatibility, it allows you to get out to network devices and edge. And this is QSecure, this is kind of our DNA. But idea being, you want to be able to control it, because this is the first significant upgrade of cryptography in 20 years. I mean, and we're operating off of, RSA was put together in the late 70s. That's been, 50 years now, that scheme, it's worked against the 0-1 computers. But all of these things now, this is a pretty good sea change. And I think this is part of what all of us are saying is why people are trying to understand this, because it's a decent shift. But the idea is to make it easy and simple along the way, so that enterprise could take the bite-sized pieces and then expand more and more.
I think that conversation, like that parallel between what the board might have with the CFO, from an accountability perspective, compared to the conversation I think the board should start having with the CISO, is, like, hey, when we put our money in the bank, when we earn that, it's going to stay there, right? That's an asset. And when we think about, our data, the what we develop right there with our organizations, and, both from a trade secret side, and for so many reasons, is just as valuable an asset as that money in the bank. And are we having that conversation? And do we take it nearly as seriously as we do cash when we say, hey, that data, is that going to stay private? Is that going to stay secure? And the ugly, and the fact is, we're going to look at it and we're going to say, we don't know. And so it's like, what measures do we take? And then it's just such, I feel like it's a conversation that, not even like it's not happening, but it's the conversation we don't have in full because it's that uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I have a question really, without generalizing, without making any specific names. All of you have important customers and so on and so forth. I'd just like to know in general terms, how does your customer base see this type of dialogue? Clearly, the six of us in this room are very, very concerned. Does the average customer respond with the same level of concern, and are they prepared to really make actionable change, or is it that they don't? What's holding industry back? Is it waiting for the standards to be published? And also adjacent to that, should we all be waiting for the announcements from NIST, or are there other standards, maybe international standards, that we should be looking at? So it's a composite question, and then after that, we'll start looking at some of the questions from the audience as well and weaving those in. Who would like to take that first?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that first. I mean, the perspective of a lot of our customers, and also back to our lineage to IBM, is they're asking, is their core infrastructure safe? Okay, are their servers safe? Is their storage safe? Is their mainframe safe? The attack and the impact is not going to come again through the last line of defense. It's going to come through the network, the 7 layers based on the OSI model. Okay, so that has kind of led to a evolution in terms of maturity of adoption of zero trust. Okay, but enterprises are not fully ready for that either. Okay, but what I'm getting to is the thinking now is evolving to zero trust outside my core enterprise compute stack, to look at inside-outside attacks as well as from the internet and the network. Okay, and tremendous amount of opportunity there for all of us to educate our customers in the 7 layers of the network, put in post-quantum cryptography along crypto agility lines. Okay, protect that front door, rather than focus so much based on past experience in the back end, potentially. So
I can add in from our customer base. Bill, again, spot on, zero trust. I mean, another component of where security has to go. We need that. Our customer base, probably about 25 global enterprise, another dozen federal agencies. I don't think it's atypical of what you see with new technology. You've got some real innovators out there that are saying, yeah, we got to get on this. And then you have some that are saying, well, we're looking at it pretty closely. We're going to do something. You have others say, well, we won't do anything until we're told to do it, right? And that's part of what Carlo, you were saying about standardization. But we've got, the way I look at it is it's kind of like as if there was an earthquake in the Pacific. We know a tsunami is coming. We know that this upgrade has to happen. There's not a choice. And of course, our federal government has to upgrade, thanks to in 2022 to what Biden signed. So our federal government is compliant now. They've got to upgrade. Other federal governments are paying attention. But that tsunami's on the way. And right now we're seeing the little waves. We're seeing the little waves starting to hit shore. Like, for instance, we just got an RFP for a very, very large global energy company that is a specific PQC RFP, maybe the first one I've seen at enterprise level. So in our enterprises, a lot of them are testing now and figuring it out, right? Nobody's just buying production versions and saying, we're going to go all the way. What they're doing now is they're all trying it out. And they're seeing, does this work in my environment? How is it affecting my existing encryption? What am I going to do next? So, but I can tell you every single week gets better, because as we get closer to NIST, as there's more news out there, as the news on quantum, volume, as folks were saying earlier, as these increase, as we see more and more breaches, and more AI development and moving to generative, people are starting to get worried. So I think the good news is we will all get there, and we're seeing a lot more activity coming at us faster every single week, every month. The bad news is still there's a lot to do. Now, Gartner told us they expect critical mass. Now, this means everybody in on PQC upgrade by 2027. So that's not far away, guys. I mean, we're basically halfway through here, almost to 2025. So in a couple of years, the entire world will be involved in upgrade. So it's happening.
I mean, I'll just finish along those lines. I mean, the new DORA regulations in Europe in terms of publishing your encryption schemes. So the regulators are waking up, and
that's right.
Yep.
No, I just add to that, Skip. Your point just now about Gardner. I'd seen them reduce it to 2029. I'm hearing 2027. The number's just going to keep falling. As I know they're usually quite conservative, and yeah, their public numbers 29. Now I'm hearing the private ones actually 27. Yeah, I get that. That's logical. They're starting to realize that they're digesting some of the same stuff that we're digesting. It's interesting that go back to an earlier point that China is spending its 5-year program on public funding for quantum is 15 billion. Whereas the US is 1.9. So that gives you an idea of the scale of what they are spending, and they're not going to tell us or publish what they do, and we're not going to know how far they've got when it matters, and that's got to be the message that we have nations out there who will happily use it against us. It's just a fact, and we need to understand that. And there was the other comment regarding other nations are using different crypto. I think you said yourself a different PQC. You're right. Germany has fallen in love with FrodoCam as one of their standards now, which is fine. And you're right. It's not a NIST standard, but that for whatever reason they've taken quite a liking to this. Which kind of brings me on to the whole NIST thing. And you know what? I know it's not a popular thing to say, but I think they've really screwed up this whole PQC evaluation. It's just got to be said. They've really handled this badly. The problem is, I was speaking to one of the crypto guys over in University of California. They didn't really engage the crypto community. The people who do the crypto analysis. So they basically put these algorithms out there, lovely competition. Hey, throw it open to the public, have a go, see if you can crack it. That really has ended up with nothing useful. The only thing that happened that was worthy of note was the Psyche algorithm got broken because two guys happened to be doing paid research for something else, for isogeny algorithms, right? Lattices. And it's only by chance that they actually broke it. They realized, oh, this could actually be a quick method of factoring the lattice. That's why it got broken, not because anyone was actually dedicating time to doing the proper cryptanalysis. So now we have a situation where we're now hearing that the main NIST will announce 3 algorithms, 2 of them based on lattice maths, and the other is hash functions. Forget hash functions because you can't use them. I can't imagine any application that could actually handle the hash function. It takes so long. The keys are so big. Financial services, forget it. We need real time. They just don't work in real time. It was only there as a backup. So you've got 2 lattice functions. The vulnerabilities are piling up. We will not actually have usable algorithms by the time quantum comes along if we don't change it. They won't last. That's the point. If we get 5 years out of them, I think that's a very conservative estimate. They could well be broken much sooner because we've already got, as I say, they already have problems, and we're creating a standard with algorithms that already have problems. This is nuts. this is truly completely nuts. But what can we do? We're now screwed because quantum is steaming ahead, doesn't really care about us at all. We're here trying to play catch up with it. We can hardly tell them, could you slow down a bit because we're not actually ready, and actually we haven't really got any decent algorithms to actually for the PQC era. That is where we are, and I see a serious risk of public key cryptography becoming non-viable probably this decade, because there are only so many intractable hard mathematical problems we can use for public key cryptography. We're running out. That's the other thing. That's why NIST ended up choosing two lattice, two of the same mathematical types for their current offering, because there's not that many, and we are running out. We are running out of hard problems to use. It's not infinite. I can see us returning to symmetric keys quite soon.
I love the sound of that. Let's. And I love what you said, Adrian, about you speaking your mind, and that's important. And it's got to be said, and so what should we do about it, right? So let's just take off for a moment our company hats, right? And the Kyndryl's approach would be this, and Gemini's approach would be that. As visionaries yourselves, imagine that you're not tied to any particular line, right? As visionaries and futurists, let's say that you had power and influence on government and power and influence on standardization bodies. What would you love to see happening over the next 12 to 24 months?
So, Carla, I'll take a stab at it. And I think I'm going to say there's three things that, and again, in that short window, in the 12 to 24 months, because having lived through multiple of these crypto evolutions throughout my career, and just knowing the scale we are at today is nowhere near the 90s when AES was introduced, or when SHA-1 and other, we just didn't have the number of devices, the complexity of the system. So it's going to be much harder today. The thing to start with over the next 12 months is organizations need to plan for the crypto swap over. They need to start getting an idea of what their assets are that have cryptography, that rely on it, and where those are in their criticality of their business, identifying them. They need to start building in a budget for that transition. So whether it's adding new technologies as overlays, like some of the product vendors here, or upgrading to the next version of their existing infrastructure that has the post-quantum safe algorithm du jour that's in there, that even if they get it for free as an upgrade, it's going to take people and time from IT and the business units to do those changes, to go in and do the validation and test to make sure nothing got broke. That's going to cost dollars and time. And so if you don't start planning for that, both from a analysis of your infrastructure and allocating budget over time to be able to do the rollout and validate the rollout, they're going to be caught with their pants down. And that is something that, when you look at some of the most important parts of the executive order from the Biden administration, the first piece of it was you have to have a plan, and you have to have a plan by this date. So it wasn't that you have to be post-quantum by this date. The first thing was you got to have a plan. And that plan has got to show how you're going to execute and how you're going to fund the eventual, and I think it was the 2027 event with the 2030 scale. And that's one of the most important things for every organization, public and private sector, is you can't wait to the event to then start planning. You have to have that plan in place, and now's the time to get your assets in line, to know what's critical, to know what you own versus what is something owned by a vendor, something owned by a service provider, what is something owned by your customer. Because like if you change the crypto algorithm, but your customers are using something else, there's going to be a problem there. And so that is number one, is plan and budget for the change. Number two is put your money where your mouth is as an organization. When you buy products from your vendors, when you go for that upgrade or that new maintenance contract, specify into the SLA, into the contract, post-quantum. You ask the hard question, when are you going to be post-quantum crypto capable? When is your product going to get the upgrade? You have to make that, and not just ask the question and then go back and sign the contract for the old stuff. Make it part of the contract, because that's going to drive the ecosystem to more quickly adopt it, whether it be the actual algorithms or the agility to plug in the algorithm when it's ready. That's the only way we're going to drive this at scale. We will find some really great point solutions. Some banks, governments are going to build for the most critical thing, a point solution. That does not scale to the broader internet. That doesn't protect your medical records on your cell phone, talking to the doctor, talking to the backend database. How are we going to scale is with we as an industry drive the overall adoption through contract language, through requirements, and through budget. And so the next thing, like I said, is contract. And then finally, it's not that I don't disagree completely with Adrian. I think the other is we have to be engaged. I think one of the things, and I was involved with the NIST, and I have to say is that when I was involved in the AES
Sorry,
competition, no problem. When I was involved back in the AES days, it was the community was engaged. We were all, and it was a little bit more lackluster this time. And that was, again, whatever you want to say about how NIST handled it, I'm not going to comment on. But the crypto community has gotten much more siloed over the years. And I think we as a broader, the crypto community needs to sort of take the initiative and get involved, because one of the things I worry about is if we have 40 crypto standards, 40 crypto algorithms, yeah, that makes sense because South Korea wants to have something different from Germany. But now even a Microsoft will have trouble. How about a small company that's trying to build a product that leverages cryptography? How about an open source project that has volunteer hours only? It's going to be too hard to manage not just the implementation, but the validation and test of 40 different versions of crypto algorithms that don't talk to each other. So we could be letting down to a path where we all have quantum safe, but nothing's working, because ultimately we are a global community on the internet. It's not that, Germany only talks to Germany and South Korea only talks to South Korea. Our applications, our data has to flow. So some of that work is we have to figure out how do we cross communicate, and whether that's better crypto agility, or some of the things we've learned from things like TLS and IPsec with having multiple cipher suites and the ability to negotiate. Some of those underpinnings need to be applied. But what I don't want to see, and I think it could be worrisome, is if we have every country and even every industry have their own post-quantum algorithm. That's setting us up for disaster on the same scale, because then we'll have nothing, because no vendor will implement that, and you'll default to, we're just going to stick with what we had. So we've got to be careful about pushing every crypto algorithm is beautiful. They may be mathematically beautiful, but what can we get into and scale? Because if you don't scale, you're going to be yet another published paper on the sidelines that didn't get implemented.
Okay. Powerful stuff. Lots of comments. Let me see if there's one or two additional comments before we jump into the responding to the audience. Anybody else like to dare be the visionary and tell us what should be happening now over the next 2 years?
I mean, I'll chime in here a little bit. I mean, the first way to move into this area, I think, is there's a strategy piece, there's discovery and assessment, there's testing. I think you need to do all three quickly. And they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, because you can work on strategy while you're doing assessment, and you can work on testing while you're doing both of those, because none of it is permanent. It's all, moving towards a plan. But I think all the panelists are right that, we don't know exactly how all this is going to play out. But the one thing we do know is that with quantum, again, we know that the prime factoring mechanisms won't work, right? They just won't work. So we have to find a way to move in quickly. I just think it has to be a consecutive approach. A parallel approach versus consecutive, because otherwise the timing just won't work. We're going to see these systems here soon. We had some groups overseas, I won't say which country, but meeting with leadership, and they know a lot about what's going on in China. And the comment to our group was, you should be very worried in the US. And so about quantum and how much you're spending. I mean, they're teaching AI in middle school in China. And so, we're seeing global shifts of power and changes. And how do we balance all of these choices that these countries are going to make on algorithms with a central system that we can all be on? That is a great question, and maybe the great patchwork comes around, and we'll patch it all together and allow these algorithms to talk. Maybe that's the next business for all the folks out on LinkedIn. Go start that business.
Thank you, Skip.
But
That's
it's going to be a challenge. Yeah.
Powerful stuff, Skip. Thank you for that. Jason, you were about to jump in as well.
I would just encourage conversation around identifying what the spend should look like, as quickly as possible. And, kind of one of my things I always like to go back to is, as our insurance providers and that space, having the conversation around, what does the exposure look like? What is coverage for this going to cost when this event happens? Are you gonna be there to make me whole on the other side? And even if I can't be made whole, am I going to be able to stay afloat after this? When we started to have the encryption extort, and then just the evolution of fraud, with emerging in the business space, the insurance that was an unexpected cost that started to go into it, and just kind of like, well, I thought that my business was insured, but this wasn't something like, am I insured against this? What is the insurance provider's exposure? And one of the dangerous things, it's a good thing and it's a bad thing, it's a two-edged event, is standardization, getting as many people trying to work with consensus on what seems safe, puts us in what we think is the safest boat to row to shore, or towards the future. But when that fails, it's sort of like the whole neighborhood hits the hail event, and it's not just my house, it's potentially an enormous event. And so there's also limitations on what we can look to in the insurance space with regards to coverage of this. And so having that conversation about, can we be safe even in the event of failure? What is the cost of that? And then from the insurance provider, they should be looking very, soon as well, in terms of both offering and evaluating what is there, because there's anytime, whether we're pricing options incorrectly, or we have something overvalued, undervalued, there's a big risk that we have things go under that we don't want to see go under, whether it's banks, insurance carriers, or corporations.
Awesome. So let me push in a couple of these questions from the audience. And what we'll do is that we'll do these in a little bit more quick fire, and see how we go. And then I have a couple more questions that I really want to ask the panelists as well before the end of the session. Any comments on how close we are to solving the Shor equation? I have seen contrasting thoughts on that. Is that the audience member there says that's all that matters. Any comments on that?
It's the wrong question.
Okay.
We're gonna lose these algorithms before we get to Shor. That's our problem. It's Shor isn't the issue. I know that we started off preaching Shor was the issue. Actually, it's not the issue, because the algorithms are lousy and we're going to lose them anyway. Shor, we've got bigger problems at the moment than Shor. That's the issue. Although it could easily be here by 2030. Short answer. All
right. I see everybody else nodding. Thank you, Adrian. Not convinced that any of this post-quantum stuff actually works. Entities will have closed laser systems. Any comments on that point?
Yeah, I can talk to that. If he means, if closed laser systems referring to quantum key distribution, if that is the reference. So quantum key distribution is probably the most potent and safest way to have cyber, because it's, you're dealing with subatomic physics that can't be, they can't be denied. That is the world. The issue there is scalability and timing. Eventually, I think you'll have QKD and PQC working together. The post-quantum cyber or quantum safe side is, I think, the bridge to get there. That's the idea. If we can make this work, that's what protects us on the way to QKD. But QKT will take a while to scale because you think about all IoT and edge devices, when you're going to get that there, and how you're going to scale to thousands, tens of thousands of devices. Point to point now is good, like telecom, big haul, the backhaul stuff, great for that. China's tested satellites, point to point, it's fine. But when you're talking about scaling across, and soon you're seeing now the AI data centers coming about with, again, thousands of devices. It'll be a while before QKD comes around.
Yeah, and the
All
cost.
right. Yeah, thank you for that. That's a great answer, Skip. I have a great question here from Chris McGinty. Check out Quantum Guard from Skywise AI. The MVP version has RSA, AES, Kyber keys, fractal potential, and NRFU fuzzy logic. Ask ChatGPT how the McGinty equation creates unhackable PQC algorithms across all scales. Now, actually, I did have a conversation with Chris, and I did check out the McGinty equation. I cannot relate it back to the panel, but I wonder if anybody can put some context around that and understand where Chris is coming from, and maybe provide some sort of answer.
I can jump in if you like.
Go ahead.
Yes. So every algorithm is based upon the principle of either a conjecture on intractability. Okay, so that's why the equation and the algorithm is hard. It's the intractability conjecture. It's either based on that or it's immutable mathematical laws. It's one or the other. Okay. All algorithms, as we have seen so far, all cryptographic algorithms are conjectures on the intractability. Even RSA was that. It just so happened that it was a pretty good conjecture. The problem is it's a non-zero risk, which means for as long as it's a conjecture, there is a risk it might be false. It may not be today, but it has the possibility of being false. If that's the case, you always have to live with the idea of one day this might not work. You do not have that with immutable mathematical laws. The one-time pad that the Vernon cipher that Shannon basically put some rules around, that's perfect. That's perfect because it's not an algorithm. It's pure mathematical laws. That's why in 1917 it still works. There is no flaw. There is no vulnerability. You see my point. Some things will work forever. Some things will work until someone figures out how to make it not work. So that's how it is with algorithms.
Yeah. And I think one thing to add on to Adrian's comment there is that the flip side, one-time pad being that perfect mathematical problem, but it has a built-in challenge. Is how does Adrian and I securely communicate that initial pad? Now, in the old days, in 1917, we'd meet under a lamppost in a dark alley and magic, hand off each other a pad, and then from there we were perfectly secure. That does not work on the internet, which is why all the other math was put together to try to solve fundamentally that one problem. Once we get a key exchanged, we've got lots of good math to deal with. How do we continually encrypt
distribution?
It?
You're right. Solve that, you solve everything.
And that's what the heart of a lot of what these conversations about. There's just to separate key distribution or the key management problem, key generation and key sharing is fundamentally going to be the hard challenge. Once we get the keys exchanged, whether through lasers or advanced NP hard problems, then we can apply sort of the best math available for the symmetric side of the game, whether that be one-time pad or symmetric key algorithms that are resilient to the more powerful computers. But at the end of the day, we're still struggling because we are not in a physical world. We are in a digital distributed world. We have to be able, and that's why it's so important for the continual research into these key exchange algorithms, because that's the foundation of all the transactions that we're doing today.
Mm-hmm.
Helpful.
I hope it doesn't become that way, but from that crypto agility and examination of, the one-time pad doesn't scale because the entropy of the system just continuously collapses at a exponential rate. Beyond that, agility is ability to switch between something, but are we introducing potentially the need? I mean, this is what if, right? what if we develop the ability to break these systems? How quickly can we break them? How much resources are applied to that? Potentially, you need to apply an equal amount of resources or measurably greater to develop systems to stay ahead of that curve. And innovation, may ultimately be a better tool to stay ahead of. And just, of course, we're always trying to innovate, but we don't have a guarantee that, computing power won't create bigger problems. That, the environment, the way Adrian said, maybe we need to step away from public key cryptography and to reevaluate how we look at trust and what we can tolerate. There's a lot of unpleasant scenarios that we just don't know.
Yep, well said, Jason. And I think that kind of leads into another question that I felt. I've got two questions. I don't know if I can manage to put my two questions across, because we have some phenomenal points and questions from the audience, and I love the passion that everybody's expressing here, and we're getting a lot of really good stuff out there. I'll be brief with my questions, and then we'll see how far we can go. I wanted to ask about energy utilization. So, as far as I understand, and I'm the layman here, cryptography is generally pretty power hungry, even on AES cryptography, and I guess post-quantum cryptography also would, in general terms, be very power hungry. I have been a speaker at the Conference of Parties, the United Nations COP, where we talk about climate change, and that's another big existential threat, quite honestly. And I wouldn't want to, there's so many threats right now. The world is in a fairly precarious state. So, does anybody have any comments to make or any ideas on, developing the future, developing a safe post-quantum future in a way that actually supports the environment as well, and that is not maybe quite so power hungry? How do you guys feel about green data centers and the application of PQC within that? Any comments on that?
Yeah, I do actually have one. You'll laugh at this, of course, that the one-time pad is the most efficient and energy efficient algorithm there is, because it's just a simple XOR against the data. You can't actually get less than that. All algorithms, of course, actually try to make it complex. So, of course, it's inherently built into them to be inefficient with energy, which is a pity. Which is why, if we focused onto mathematical, the immutable laws of mathematics to create our solutions, we would actually, by nature, make them efficient. Not that many people know how to do that, and that's probably where the problem is. That's why I think, Jason, innovation may be the key here. We need innovation like crazy, because there are ways of doing it. We just need to basically start thinking about it. That's what that's what the cryptanalysis, that's what the PhD students should be doing at the universities, focusing on that, as in ways. It's not happening at the moment. There's nothing going on. PhD students at universities aren't going down the crypto route. They're just not touching it. I'm told there are no jobs in it, which means there's no career for it. So it's not getting done. This work is not happening, and that's also this is why we are where we are. So.
Yeah, I don't want to address this, from the side of corporate self-promotion. I'm incredibly close to this, but I do think that examination around, what makes for efficiency and then what makes for security, these are not exclusive operations. There are ways to do to be both efficient and to be secure. The natures of complexity that you described earlier, they aren't changing, and we're not. There's only so much we can. At the end of the day, right? We're dealing with binary code, right? It's ones and zeros that we are turning into ones and zeros, and the analysis side is not going to be. It's going to be broader than like simple code interception over the wire. And so green is not merely a matter of how much, how many steps, how many dependent operations does an algorithm require in order to perform. Green is also a measure of things that support error correction, redundancy. Does a product support use cases with regards to latency? What size pipelines? How much data do we need to be able to press? How much information do we require in a secure volume of data? There are systems that can provide high security for low volumes of data, or little security for high volumes of data. But what are your priorities around your data? They're more than simply just make it safe. That we don't choose one size vehicle fits all, and one
Right.
encryption algorithm may have inherent advantages over another.
I
Yeah,
think
I would add to that, it's a component of unit of cost of compute.
Yeah.
If you have a complex optimization problem and it requires a lot of resources, obviously you need to secure that too, right? They're not mutually exclusive,
Right.
so it should be a factor component of unit of cost of compute to secure it.
I would add two points to that, and I want to pick off something Jason said because it's really getting to the heart of the problem. Today, there is so much data, and for a lot of reasons, people keep data around, lots of data around, because we think that's going to be valuable to our AI, or I need to use it sometime for an analysis later. So the more data that we have to protect at the post-quantum, the more post-quantum cryptography we have to do, and to the point that Carlo and Jason talked about, the more energy is going to be consumed. And so one interesting strategy is, instead of trying to find the perfect algorithm that's both energy efficient and quantum safe, which right now I don't think we have, let's look at how can we get rid of data? How do we not retain so much data, not send so much data, only send the most important data? One way of doing that is, a lot of systems are built away of the sensor out the field, and then we do the AI in the cloud. And so we're shipping a lot of data back and forth. That's not necessarily the best approach. And some of it is taking an architectural approach to where I need to have the data analysis and pushing that closer to the data generation. So I'm not having to send as much data, and therefore not having to encrypt as much, and therefore it can be more energy efficient. And so a lot of it is making better decisions about our data throughout its life cycle. The other is recognizing that these algorithms, the ones that Adrian was talking about that are the NP hard ones, by definition are performance hogs because they're complex. And lattices are worse than the trapdoor functions we've been dealing with for the past 30 years. They're terrible in current computing architectures. And so one of the things that Intel and others are working on is how do we accelerate that math in hardware so you get better performance and better power efficiency for these new wave of algorithms. But I think that's the common step, and we're all going to do that. We're going to get you to a certain step, but I think also taking a better approach to how you deploy your systems when you're dealing with sensitive data, to minimize data minimization, minimize how much data is being consumed or produced and where it gets transferred. Because if I can produce data in a sensor and analyze it or provide the inferencing there, and then only send the results, that's much less data that has to be encrypted, and therefore could help towards those efficiency goals.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, guys, this is a heck of a quality workshop. And I think at the end of this, we will, I hope all have to agree that we're going to have to do this again because the dynamics in the group is phenomenal. The audience participation is phenomenal as well. The number of people involved is just great. It's been a phenomenal conversation. We have a few minutes left. What I'd like to do now is just to go around the table and ask for closing remarks, perhaps some advice and your hopes of how you'd like to see things move on from here. Next tangible, actionable steps that companies might want to take. Let's do that. We've got this. Invest about a minute each, and then we'll close on time. Bill, would you like to start?
Sure. I mean, I would just like to add, kind of picking out some of the messaging. I mean, it's really a holistic approach is needed Convergence is needed with other emerging technologies, AI and machine learning. We tend to, as humans, think in binary fashion, especially with new shiny toys. So the hype train follows the newest shiny toy, and then we kind of disregard the one that's coming up the track after it. But maybe they should be tackled in parallel. So
Bill.
that's what I would
Thank
close.
That's a good soundbite. Steve, you're next on my list.
Sure. I would go back to something I said earlier, is that organizations that are, questioning, what do I do about this? I think that there are two tactical things you can do today that will set you up for future success. Number one, start with understanding your assets that are leveraging cryptography today. Get those documented. Two, start putting together your plan for migration. Even if you're not implementing it today, you have to have a plan, you have to have a rollout strategy, and you need to start allocating funding for those events, for the services, the IT, and the products and technology deployments to be able to do that transition. And if you don't plan for it, you won't be successful. And then lastly, I'll give a shout out, something Adrian and I were just discussing a few moments ago. If you are a cryptographer or have dabbled in it, and this is an area of interest, get involved. NIST is open to people coming in and collaborating. Universities have got a lot of really good research. There is need for people coming together, both analyzing the existing slate of algorithms, proposing optimizations, as well as coming up with novel ways of solving some of these hard problems like key distribution or long-term data storage. Get involved. This is the opportunity. And I wish we had the same level of excitement that we had back in the EAS days and back in the Sean days. I think we could get there again and really get to some really good algorithms and mechanisms. And then one last plug in, not just the math, but the applied math is equally important today. So I'll leave on that note.
Thank you, Steve. Skip.
Coming off mute, sorry. Yeah, I think the answer is, from what I can see is, rolling on what Steve said, start testing. Get some of these algorithms in your environment, your enterprise, start testing them, just start working with them, see what happens. It's not expensive. It's all open source. You can use them and get used to it, right? The whole idea is you got to put your toe in the water and start as soon as possible. There's just no reason not to. You take your time as far as whenever you'll go into production. That's down the road. Right now, just start testing.
Thank you, Skip. Adrian.
Okay. So if you do nothing else, then quantum triage is what you need. If secure your perimeter. If that's all you do, then do that. If that's at least secured for a quantum level, a PQC level, then you at least have something. You know the threat is bigger on the outside than it is on the inside. You can deal with it. If you at least have a perimeter whereby you know that at least everything going out will be quantum, PQC protected, that's something. I think it'd be better if they followed, got themselves a decent plan, as Steve says. But I know there's an awful lot of apathy out there. If you do nothing else, just secure your perimeter, and then start doing something.
Thank you, Adrian. And Jason, last remarks from you.
Thank you, Carlo. I really hope that individuals and businesses not only take stock of what programs they're using, but start to pay closer attention to their individual use cases. Whether it's small biomed implantables from the security side of space, and we're paying attention to picojoules and current with some secure communications to the big industrial, lightweight cables and transmissions. Investment in agility and investment into exploration of what items are going to, how is your cryptography, how is your security going to encumber you, or how is it going to, allow you to continue to do business and allow your products to operate the way that you want to, thinking of it as body armor, thinking of it as the protection of the ship of your hull, whatever that is, how is your crypto systems going to play and support your business and support your product?
Awesome. Well, this was quite something. You guys are absolute heroes, and you should be sung about a lot more. And that is the purpose of this type of setup and panel. Thank you very much for sharing your insights, for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, your expertise. I'm so excited. I think everybody else is. We want more. Yeah, so I'd like to thank you all very much for participating. I'd like to thank the audience for participating so interactively. The questions are great. The questions I did not pick on, I already have. You will see that there are answers to those questions on the other videos that are published on the Tortora Breda Institute YouTube channel. So there's a lot of good content in there that already has some of those questions answered. And the ones that are not there, I'll factor into the next conversation. So, yep, we're now 1 minute over. I'll close it now. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care. Have a great day.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.